This is breaking news on Fox 32. A commercial jet crashed near the airport in Washington, D.C. I'm Scott Schneider.
I'm Dawn Hasbrook. This is a live look at the scene at Ronald Reagan National Airport. You can see a massive rescue effort there. This has just happened, and we are going to continue to bring you updates the moment they come in. This was an American Airlines flight from Wichita to D.C. It collided with a military Black Hawk helicopter and plunged into the Potomac River. Everything in and out of the airport there has been shut down.
And this is chilling video from a camera at the Kennedy Center. It appears to show two aircraft coming together and a fireball exploding. There may have been as many as 60 people on board that jet. We do not know about the crew of the helicopter.
This is video from EarthCam, and you can see there off in the distance. Take a look. You see that flash in the distance right there? We'll go in a little tighter on it. You can see to the left there's a plane that looks like coming in. There's a brighter light. And right there, you'll see that horrific fireball. And then, as Steve talked about, you can see whatever is left afterwards falling down pretty quickly. I want to bring Aaron Katersky in, sitting here with me, watching that, Aaron. It's so difficult to watch because we're already being told there are water rescues being made. Everybody's hoping beyond hope that they're pulling people who are survivors of this crash out of the Potomac. But we do know that there are going to be casualties here.
Undoubtedly, Phil, and probably several that we're hearing already confirmed, but we don't have firm numbers yet because those teams are working furiously to find any survivors they can. Both of the aircraft, the commercial jet operating under the American Airlines banner coming in from Wichita with about 60 people aboard, and the military Black Hawk helicopter from the United States Army. Both of those, what's left of them anyway, ended up in the Potomac. It had just started to thaw after being iced over for weeks, so the conditions are suboptimal.
Joining us now is White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is with us. Caroline, we obviously had you booked for a very different reason on the program tonight, but you see what's going on at the Potomac, not far from where you work every day. Unfortunately, online, I can't verify the truth of it. There is a video that shows two aircraft colliding over the Potomac. I'm looking at the emergency response. Have you heard anything at the White House?
Yes, Sean, of course, this was not the planned topic of discussion for your program tonight. But in light of this breaking news, I have called over to my counterparts at the White House, and I can confirm that President Trump has been made aware of this situation. And tragically, it appears that a military helicopter collided with a regional jet at DCA Airport right here in Washington, D.C. That's all I can confirm at this point in time. And I can just say that the thoughts and the prayers of the entire Trump administration are with all those that are involved. And we ask the public in this area to please stand by for guidance from law enforcement and allow them to do their jobs as they attempt to save lives right now.
Joining us now here on the scene, Mary Schiavo. She is a CNN aviation analyst, former Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Transportation. We also have Cedric Leighton. He's a CNN military analyst, retired Air Force colonel. Thank you both for being here with us on this morning as we cover this unfolding tragedy. And I do just want to reset for everyone who's waking up here on the East Coast. Mary, help us understand what happened here. We know these two planes collided. It's not something, thank the Lord, that we see very often in this country. What happened last night?
What happened last night is American Airlines being flown by PSA Airlines, a Canadair regional jet, 700, holds up to 70 people with 64 on board. It was coming into land, as happens, every few minutes, all the time. There were several planes in the air. It was a busy airport. I landed here myself at 7:30. It was very dark, very cold, a little bit bumpy wind, but weather wasn't really a factor in the accident. Also operating in the area was an Army helicopter. It is reported that it was a training mission. There were lots of helicopters in D.C. ferry around VIPs and all sorts of folks, but this was a training mission. The air traffic control tower specifically asked, it's reported, did ask the helicopter if the helicopter had this flight, this American Airlines flight, in sight. That's very important. That's very telling. It's a key piece of evidence because the aircraft, the commercial passenger service aircraft, are always under full air traffic control and what's called instrument air traffic direction. So that was flying exactly as the tower, or should have been flying exactly as the tower instructed. There's no indication it was not. So the helicopter was doing what's called see and avoid. The tower said, do you have this aircraft? And get in line or fly in behind it. So it was supposed to find this aircraft in the air, see it, and then fall in behind it.
And of course, we can hear the helicopters overhead right now. And just to give everyone a sense of where we're standing, we can also see the lights from the boats that are part of this search and rescue operation. At this hour, officials have not updated. We're still waiting to see at what point this may become a search and recovery operation, because again, we know that no survivors have been pulled from the water.
Joining us now is the former airline pilot, well known for being at the controls for the miracle landing on the Hudson River, Sully Sullenberger, who is also the former ambassador of the U.S. to the International Civil Aviation Organization. Ambassador, thank you for joining us this morning. I always enjoy seeing you, but I wish this time it was under different circumstances. I know that you have been following, you've been hearing the reports. Can you just give us your perspective on what you believe happened?
We don't know yet. The investigation may take a year, but the NTSB investigators will find the probable cause and the contributing factors. We will learn from it, and we will do what we always do after an accident, learn from it and improve our system, change for the better. What seems apparent from the air traffic control communications is that the airplanes were able to see each other, at least one was able to see the other, and the air traffic controller was able to relieve himself of the requirement to have him separate the airplanes, and the pilots would have to separate from each other visually by identifying the other aircraft and staying a safe distance away. And obviously at some point, separation was tragically lost.
It was, and given your decades of flying experience, folks are just scratching their head and they're saying, Sully, how could something like this happen? How could it happen?
Well, we have to realize how many things have to go right every day for us to have this now ultra safe transportation industry. We have in this country, 10,000 flights a day, 10.2 million flights a year, and we operate them all safely. But it's hard. It's hard to have the diligence and the dedication to adhere to best practices on every minute of every hour of every day, every week, every month, every year for a decades-long aviation career. That's what's required. And any lapse could potentially be fatal, even though we have a lot of safety layers in there. If all the dominoes line up in the wrong way, we can have, on rare occasions, a catastrophic event. And it's important to know that given enough time, given enough flights, given enough flight hours, eventually whatever can happen will happen unless we work very hard to prevent every incident from turning into an accident.
A recovery effort underway after an American Airlines jet crashed into an Army helicopter near Reagan National Airport, of course, near Washington, D.C.
Yeah, the terrifying collision was caught on video by an observation camera from EarthCam. You can see the exact moment that the two aircraft collide in midair. You can see the fireball there. It happened just before 9 p.m. last night. Officials are still trying to determine what caused that crash. We know that minutes before the jet was landing, the American Airlines jetliner was asked to switch runways. They were asked to switch to a smaller runway They were originally supposed to land on a much larger one that is more commonly used. So they diverted and altered their flight path, started their descent, had their, banking that left turn to land. And that's when they had a rapid altitude loss. Air traffic controllers did try to warn the helicopter to pass behind the jet moments before the crash. 2 different audio dispatches to that helicopter. The helicopter pilot, however, did not respond. Now, hundreds of first responders are there at the freezing Potomac River working that scene, trying to, of course, federal investigators are there now trying to map out that crash site. And investigators, unfortunately, saying that there are no survivors.
Dozens of bodies already pulled from the river, and those first responders are going to continue working, they say, until they've recovered every body. Shannon Murray here with what we're learning about some of those people on board. Shannon?
Yeah, Lauren and Brandon, U.S. figure skating confirmed some of its athletes were on board that plane. And they had just left Wichita, Kansas after competing in the U.S. figure skating championships. The American Airlines jet carried 60 passengers and 4 crew members when it collided with that Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 soldiers. First responders have recovered the bodies of 27 passengers from the jet and 1 from the helicopter. Officials are still searching for other casualties, but say they do not believe there are any survivors, which would make it the deadliest U.S. air crash in nearly 24 years.
I'd like to request a moment of silence for the victims and their families, please. Thank you very much. I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal, and I have to say the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. So quick, so fast, it was mobilized immediately. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly.
There are 41 remains in total of the 67 believed to be dead that have been recovered. 28 have been positively identified, and as of 6 a.m. this morning, next of kin notifications have been made to 18 families. He also said, obviously, this is a very tough response for their people, for their responders who are working the scene, which you can only imagine is an understatement. Let's go to CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry, who is inside that briefing and is at Reagan National Airport with the latest. And Skylar, you asked a question regarding the conditions for recovery, whether it is impacting the recovery and whether they fear that they won't be able to recover all of the bodies. What was the response?
Yeah, 2 parts to that. There is rain in this forecast here in Washington, D.C. for the rest of the day. The fire chief, Donnelly, spoke to that, saying that they train for these types of conditions year-round, and so they feel as if this will not impact their recovery process up until this point. In addition to that, resources coming in to help try to figure out exactly where the rest of these bodies may be. On that front, there was a question that was asked talking about the removal of the debris and whether taking out parts of the fuselage will help them recover the rest of the remains. The chief, as well as other officials, say that they felt confident that that might lead to the discovery of the rest of those remains. As you pointed out, only 41 of the 67 have been recovered up until this point, 28 positively ID'd, and then, yes, 18 next of kin families have been notified. And so there's still a long way to go in this process. We have spoken with the Coast Guard, who've talked about the number of cruise resources as well as part of the unified command here in the D.C. area along the Potomac that is helping with this recovery process as well.
In the last hour, we just got an update from the NTSB saying both black boxes from the helicopter and the plane have also been recovered as well. And investigators hope this could give them some of those answers.
After recovering the regional jet's black boxes from the Potomac, the NTSB says it will evaluate cockpit communications, landing gear, flight data, and debris as it tries to determine how a regional jet and military helicopter collided. But the focus could shift to air traffic control after an FAA report showed one operator was handling the job of two people at the time of the accident.
What people are talking about is a rough draft of something, but it is a small piece of a very big puzzle, thousands of data points.
The Pentagon is also looking into whether the helicopter was at the appropriate altitude and whether the crew was using night vision goggles during the exercise. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says while there's a pause on this specific exercise, training throughout the military will continue.
We have to train safely. Something like this can never happen and is completely unacceptable.
Divers have pulled dozens of bodies from the water so far, and they expect recovery operations to last through the weekend.
They're assessing the work that's going to be needed to recover the aircraft from the water.
And as that investigation continues, the FAA has closed routes near Reagan National Airport to most helicopter traffic.
And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Live picture there in Philadelphia. We do have some breaking news there in the city of brotherly love. I want to put this tweet up from our colleague there at Fox 29, reporter Chris O'Connell. He says there have been several reports of a plane crash into a building in northeast Philadelphia. Fox 29 Philadelphia have been covering this story within the last few minutes. They are sending reporters to the scene. I believe some of those reporters are on the scene as well here. You can see Steve Keeley shooting this video from his cell phone. He says bulletin airplane crash there on Roosevelt Boulevard. He says fires burning in multiple spots on Cotman Avenue. He says pieces of airplane scattered there on the ground. Jason Martinez with this video saying this is being described as a plane crash in the area of Bustleton and Cotman Avenues in northeast Philly. That's a doorbell camera provided by a viewer there to Fox 29. Let's take it full here. Look at that. And you see the nighttime sky light up in orange. Wow. In the meantime here, Fox 29 in Philadelphia is in breaking news coverage of this. Let's listen.
This is Jason Martinez here in the Fox 29 newsroom. You are looking at what's being described as a plane crash in northeast Philadelphia. This is doorbell camera provided by a viewer. Left of your screen, you saw the fireball come out of the sky. Again, this is being described to us as a plane crash northeast Philadelphia in the area of Bustleton and Cotman Avenues. You saw the left of your screen, the fireball come right out. Take another closer look there. And so this just happening here in the last 20 minutes or so. Again, northeast Philadelphia. I believe we have Steve Keeley in the area on the phone. Steve, what can you tell us? Do we have Steve? We do not appear to have Steve at the moment. As soon as we get him, we'll bring it to you. But again, viewer-provided video from a doorbell camera in northeast Philadelphia showing a fireball fall out of the sky. Of course, the northeast Philly airport, just less than a mile away from this location. And so a lot of viewers have been calling our newsroom and telling us that they believe this was a plane crash in this area of Bustleton and Cotman. But this doorbell camera video makes you question exactly what we're seeing. Here's a closer look. And really, I can only describe that as a fireball that falls out of the sky. And again, this is Roosevelt Mall, I believe, the parking lot in northeast Philly. And this is ground video that we're just getting in. You're seeing it as I am seeing it. Police taping the area off, smoke and debris in this area. And this, of course, all happening as we are still sorting through a plane crash that happened in D.C. No word on the size of the plane that crashed, what caused it. We are just learning this. There's some.
I'll stay back here.
Okay, now we have Steve. Steve, if you can hear me, what can you tell us?
Jason, I was just warned. I'm fairly close. I was nearby. This happened at 6 o'clock. I got it confirmed by 6:13 and 6:14. And then a top commander in the department told me his house shook. He called the bomb squad, and they told him a plane had crashed. Then lots of calls came in. I was nearby. I saw everybody racing over here. I raced with them. I'm looking at 2 fires going right now on Cottman Avenue. I'm standing in one of the driveways to the Roosevelt Mall. As I ran over here, I parked in the McDonald's at Cottman and the Boulevard. I wondered what I was tripping over, and it was pieces of an airplane scattered in the mall parking lot. They then began roping that off, and the heavy smell of jet fuel is in the air and has been in the air. There is still black smoke. The fires are not under control, and then an officer just told me to take cover behind the police and fire vehicle I'm there because there's a gas line nearby. Another commander told me cars were on fire. This was in rush hour. I know it because I was just on Cottman Avenue seconds before this, approaching the Boulevard when this plane crashed. So it was wall-to-wall cars approaching Cottman and the Boulevard, so people were stopped in traffic. I don't know if cars are on fire in front of me or parts of the plane, but it looks like multiple fires, and the fires are not right next to each other. They're a good 100 yards from each other. So there is a string of damage and a string of fires. This mall is under some kind of construction, so they have a tarp around about a 6-foot-tall tent. Every police officer, every fire department member in the city must be up here right now, and there's still more coming on the way. There is so much smoke in the air going right over the mall right here, and this mall was packed too. They had to move all the people back for their own good, and the air quality is not good for them, but everybody was out here. Now I can see one car I'm looking through the fence, Jason. I'm looking down in front of the Dunkin' Donuts on Cottman, and again, this is right before the Boulevard. Right in front of the Dunkin' Donuts, it looks like an SUV is on fire, and the flames are all through the street. And there's so many fires here, and the fire department's also trying to worry about that gas line that's in danger. Now I'm counting the fires, Jason. 1, 2, 3, 4 fires I can see right here, all spread out along Cottman Avenue right now. Steve, I can't see what's burning.
Steve, we are looking at viewer doorbell camera of what looks like just a fireball falling out of the sky, and as this plane hits the ground, just flames just immense, and we see a shot now on the ground. We see looks like some cars are on fire here. You say you smell jet fuel?
Yeah, I can still smell it. There's a smell of fuel in the air, a heavy smell. And if they're reporting a fireball falling out of the sky, the parts of the airplane I saw were not burned. And again, we're near Northeast Philly Airport. It would be an unreal coincidence if there was another midair collision here. I don't know, but and I didn't see any fireball in the sky because I haven't seen that video yet. I'm only on the phone here with you. But the parts of the airplane I saw did not have any burn marks on them. And again, I'm just trampling over them. And in the first video I sent in and put on, I'm tripping over the airplane parts before I realize what I'm tripping on. And then an officer says, hey, this is a debris field here from the airplane. And that's it. So we don't know what happened. We just know that an airplane crashed here somehow. And there's parts of the airplane long before where the fires are burning. They're in the Roosevelt Mall parking lot in front of the T-Mobile store. And that is a good 200, 300, 400 yards from where I'm looking at a fire burning right now outside the driveway of the Roosevelt Mall.
This morning, investigators at the scene of a deadly plane crash in Northeast Philadelphia that led to this massive fireball and shower of embers.
Oh my God.
You can see the plane plunging straight down before the explosion sent people running.
It sounded like it's getting closer, then it just was like, yeah, then I had to get low a little bit and it hit the street right in front of me.
Andre Gary had been walking in the area and captured the hellscape that ensued shortly after 6 p.m. Friday. Scattered fires burning through homes and cars.
What a terrifying moment.
I thought the world was ending.
Officials say the 6 people on the medical transport plane died, including 2 crew members, 2 medical professionals, and a mother and daughter, all from Mexico. The family confirming Josue Juarez was the co-pilot. 1 person on the ground in a car was also killed, and 19 others injured.
And this is not etched in stone. The investigation is ongoing.
The NTSB, who is leading that investigation, calling the crash an accident.
A slight right turn followed by a slight left turn and then a steep descent towards the ground.
Operated by Jet Rescue Air Ambulance, the plane was set to fly to Missouri and then Mexico, carrying a young patient who was in the U.S. for a life-saving treatment, according to the company. Just after taking off, the pilot of the Learjet 55 responded to air traffic control.
123.8, Mike Tango Sierra, 056 medevac. Thank you, good day.
But then communications from the crew went quiet.
Medevac Med Service 056 Northeast Tower, you on frequency?
Officials say the plane was only in the air for a minute before it crashed into a busy roadway at rush hour. A multi-agency response swarming the scene.
Thanks to their speedy work last night, they were able to get the fire out, and I believe they were able to save others in the process.
With the size of the explosion in such a densely populated region, officials acknowledge the number of deaths and injured could continue to rise. Authorities going door to door to get a full understanding of the impact.
New video from the National Transportation Safety Board is giving more insight to the deadly plane crash in Philadelphia on Friday night.
Yeah, this new video from the NTSB shows the scale of damage from that site of the medical jet crash. 7 people were killed, including 1 person on the ground. Emily Ikeda reports on the search for answers.
This morning, federal investigators combing through charred debris after a medical transport plane nosedived and exploded near a mall and neighborhoods in Northeast Philadelphia. The crash sending people scrambling for cover. In the debris field scattered over several city blocks, the NTSB recovering both of the engines, the jet's enhanced ground proximity warning system, and the cockpit voice recorder, which was uncovered in a crater 8 feet deep. Taking off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport Friday, the Learjet was in the air for less than a minute before it crashed, killing 1 person on the ground and all 6 Mexican citizens on board, including Liseth Murillo Osuna and her daughter Valentina Guzman Murillo, who was 11 years old, according to Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. They were heading home to Mexico after 4 months of treatment at Shriners Children's Hospital. The fiery explosion also injured 22 others, according to officials. Andre Howard says his 10-year-old son was struck in the head with metal while trying to protect his younger sister.
We're supposed to be home relaxing, and we're here fighting for his life.
Beyond the yellow tape along Cotman Avenue, as many as 11 homes significantly damaged in the crash. Now, in this shaking community, the long road to recovery underway.
We will get through this moment.
We are following some breaking news out of Houston, Texas, after a United airplane caught fire at Bush's airport right there. It did have to be evacuated. So far, no reports of any injuries, but I did want to share some video that's coming into our studio. Take a listen.
Yo, it's on fire! Oh my God. Please get us on. It's on fire. This is jet.
All right, so that was some video right there that we did want to share with you from our Fox 26 Houston. Meanwhile, you are taking a live look at Houston, Texas right now. I did want to share some more information about the flight from Houston to New York that did have to be evacuated after it caught fire during takeoff. That's according to the FAA. And the very latest is that the FAA says the crew of United Airlines Flight 1382 had to
stop their takeoff from George Bush Intercontinental Airport because of a reported engine issue. That happened at around 8:35 a.m. local time this morning. We shared video acquired by Fox 26 Houston with you, showing that the wing of the plane caught on fire. And in that video, you heard a flight attendant asking for passengers to stay in their seats. One of those passengers pushing back, saying, "It's on fire." Now, some passengers did have to use the emergency slide to get off the plane. That's according to the Houston Fire Department. No injuries were reported, and the FAA currently investigating the situation. I also wanted to share this with you. This is a statement from the spokesperson of the FAA on this incident, saying, quote, "The crew of United Airlines Flight 1382 safely aborted its takeoff from the George Bush Intercontinental Houston Airport in Texas due to a reported engine issue at around 8:35 a.m. local time on Sunday. Passengers deplaned on the runway and were bused to the terminal. The Airbus A319 was flying to LaGuardia Airport in New York. The FAA will investigate. Contact the airline for additional information."
Yeah, the White House says Trump's tariffs on Canada and Mexico are still set to take effect on Saturday, this weekend. Watch this.
The president has made it very clear, again, that he expects every nation around this world to cooperate with the repatriation of their citizens. And the president has also put out specific statements in terms of Canada and Mexico when it comes to what he expects in terms of border security. We have seen a historic level of cooperation from Mexico. But again, as far as I'm still tracking, and that was last night talking to the president directly, February 1st is still on the books.
All right, John Lonsky, he's an economist and is with me now. John, what do you think happens on Saturday if the tariffs go in place on Saturday? What happens?
Unless the company is directly affected, not much will happen. I don't think it's going to have much of an immediate impact on the economy. Let's take a look at what's going on with the stock market. You would think that if this was such a big deal, if this was such a threat to inflation expectations, to business activity, the market would be sinking. It's not sinking because of the possible imposition of tariffs on Saturday.
Is it possible the tariffs go into effect, 25% Mexico, 25% Canada, and nothing happens?
Yeah, nothing may happen. And I would add that let's not forget this is a negotiating tool as far as immigration policy is concerned, and also as far as the illegal importation of drugs into the United States go. So this may get both Canada and Mexico to have some reforms that please the Trump administration, and that's the end of tariffs.
Does Trump have the strongest negotiating position at the moment?
I think he does. The United States has the upper hand because the U.S. economy is doing much better than the Canadian and Mexican economy. We're talking about two economies that are growing by a rate slower than 2%. U.S. economic growth is close to 3%. We have a much stronger labor market according to our relatively low unemployment rate.
Tariffs on Canada and Mexico, 25%. That's coming on Saturday?
That's coming on the 1st, okay. Saturday.
But no oil tariff, no oil tariffs.
No, I don't. Well, I didn't say that. You said that. No.
Well, I don't want to misinterpret.
No, we may or may not. We're going to make that determination probably tonight on oil. Okay. Yeah, because they send us oil. We'll see. It depends on what the price is. If the oil is properly priced, if they treat us properly, which they don't. Look, Mexico and Canada have never been good to us on trade. They've treated us very unfairly on trade. And we will be able to make that up very quickly because we don't need the products that they have. We have all the oil you need. We have all the trees you need, meaning the lumber. We have more than almost anybody in those two categories. In oil, we have more than anybody, and we don't need anybody's trees. We have to free up some of the tree areas that we have. We have great lumber in this country. We have to free them up environmentally, which I can do very quickly. But we don't need what they have. And for us to be subsidizing Canada to the tune of $175 billion a year and subsidizing Mexico to the tune of $250 billion, $300 billion a year, And Mexico is a method of China sending in its product. And with China, I'm also thinking about something because they're sending fentanyl into our country. And because of that, they're causing us hundreds of thousands of deaths. So China is going to end up paying a tariff also for that. And we're in the process of doing that.
What was new about this and has markets moving?
Well, I think what's really new is that this is confirmation from the president that he does intend to go ahead with the implementation of these 25% tariffs on the U.S.'s closest neighbors and biggest trading partners on Saturday, February 1st. Now, to your point, Alex, he had suggested already that February 1st was kind of a deadline, is his mind. He suggested that on his very first day in office after his inauguration last week. And it was reiterated by the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, in her first news briefing earlier this week as well, that February 1st was still the date they were looking at. Something interesting, though, from these remarks per our reporters in the room is that he said he will be making a determination on oil. Obviously, oil specifically a big end product, a big import from Canada. It would have the potential to impact crude prices, as we're already seeing today with a little bit of lift in crude futures. But that's something he's going to be keeping an eye on. But what the president is suggesting here in the Oval Office is that he doesn't see the U.S. as having need of the products coming from these countries like Canada and Mexico. He thinks the trade relationship is unfair, and a lot of this, too, in his mind, is about fentanyl coming over our borders.
Okay, whatever. Let's. But on the point, though, about the things coming in and out here, too. I mean, this is a huge cross-asset move, and we need our viewers to understand what's happening here. It's not just the peso, it's not just gold. Lumber going down as well because of a comment saying that apparently we don't need the lumber coming out of Canada. It gets to a question here, Kayleigh, as to whether the White House has even tried to articulate any sort of sense of how we, I guess, replace, if at all, any of those things. I know his comments are basically, we have the lumber, we have the oil, and everything else we need. I'm sure a lot of executives would disagree with that. When do we articulate more of where that supply is?
Well, it's an excellent question, Romaine. The president's intention, he says, by tariffs is to protect American industry, that he wants more of this coming from the U.S., inclusive, of course, of energy production, and that pertains to oil, as we were just discussing. But yes, you're exactly right. There's not a clear one-for-one replacement in a lot of these goods we are importing from both Canada and from Mexico, which is why many have pointed to the potential inflationary impacts of this shortages that could be created. But those in the Trump administration or those about to join it, including Howard Lutnick, who has been tapped to be the Secretary of Commerce, was testifying in his confirmation hearing yesterday, putting down as nonsense the notion that tariffs were going to cause inflation. Lutnick is supposed to have a big role in shaping the trade policy of this administration, though he is not confirmed yet. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is. It's unclear what Bessent's view on this particular move might be or whether or not he's going to be supporting the president on this one. But this does throw a little bit of cold water on this notion that the threat of tariffs was simply for a negotiation, that it was a tactic for Donald Trump to extract concessions he wanted from these governments. It doesn't seem, at least at this time, that that's necessarily the case. It does look like he is intent on imposing these on Saturday, though I'm sure we're going to be getting responses from Ottawa and Mexico City in pretty short order, as Canada, for example, has threatened retaliatory tariffs on the U.S., suggestions even that it could be dollar for dollar.
Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, said today that if the U.S. imposes tariffs, he will respond and he will not relent until the tariffs are removed. Are we seeing the start of a trade war with Canada?
I don't think so. I think the president is going to implement those tariffs tomorrow, and he will respond to Mr. Trudeau's comments in due time, I am sure.
What type of things have to happen? What does the administration need to see in order to avoid those tariffs?
Well, the tariffs are incoming tomorrow on Canada. And the reason for that is because both Canada and Mexico have allowed an unprecedented invasion of illegal fentanyl that is killing American citizens and also illegal immigrants into our country. In fact, I have more language for you right here. Canada, Mexico, and China, which, as I mentioned, President Trump will implement a 10% tariff on China, have all enabled illegal drugs to pour into America. The amount of fentanyl that has been seized at the southern border in the last 2 years alone has the potential to kill tens of millions of Americans. And so the president is intent on doing this. And I think Justin Trudeau would be wise to talk to President Trump directly before pushing outlandish comments like that to the media.
The plan to implement 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada and 10% on China. These tariffs mean U.S. companies buying the imports will have to pay a percentage extra to the U.S. Treasury.
Trump's pick for Commerce Secretary argues this will pressure American companies
companies to buy from domestic producers, while serving as a leverage against the three countries. But many economists say tariffs typically lead to higher prices for consumers on everything from groceries to cars and electronics. Tonight, 7 News reporter Derek Hyde is sharing voices from both sides of this tariff tug-of-war and how local lawmakers are already pushing back.
President Donald Trump is on the verge of imposing tariffs on all Canadian goods. Here in Buffalo at Rigidized Metals, I'm told that could be a very, very bad thing.
I've been here for 85 years, and we've oftentimes had a Canadian flag flying here.
The White House announced that starting Saturday, President Trump will impose a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada. Rigidized Metals has operated in Buffalo's Old First Ward since the 40s, and Richard Smith, its president, tells me Canadian goods are woven into the fabric of his company.
We probably buy, 20 to 25% of our carbon steel from Canada.
Those rolls of steel are then texturized and sold to customers across North America.
Oppose tariffs. Tariffs are always a bad idea.
But not every single store in our area feels the same way about those tariffs, especially right here at the Made in America store in Elma, where everything is, you guessed it, made in America.
I love Canada, but I don't worry about tariffs because I'm all about Made in America.
Mark Andal, the owner of the Made in America store in Elma, wouldn't be paying these tariffs, but thinks they could help other businesses.
I don't mind tariffs at all. I think it'll help American companies because we're always trying to get back to where we were. American companies need all the help they can get.
And he thinks they might inspire more people to shop for American products.
If they have the fear that tariff are, raising prices, then just shop in your own country, shop within your borders, you'll be fine.
Meanwhile, Congressman Tim Kennedy doesn't think this is a good plan. He told reporters he's holding out hope the White House rescinds this, just like the federal funding freeze earlier this week.
Hopefully, they'll listen to us just like they did earlier this week, and they rescind this order as well.
As of Friday afternoon, plans to impose those tariffs will start this weekend.
Today, the United States informed us they will be imposing 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States and 10% on Canadian energy. A decision that, should they elect to proceed with, should take effect on Tuesday, February 4th. Tonight, first, I want to speak directly to Americans, our closest friends and neighbors. This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people. As I have consistently said, tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery stores and gas at the pump. They will impede your access to an affordable supply of vital goods crucial for U.S. security, such as nickel, potash, uranium, steel, and aluminum. They will violate the free trade agreement that the President and I, along with our Mexican partner, negotiated and signed a few years ago. Together, we've built the most successful economic, military, and security partnership the world has ever seen. A relationship that has been the envy of the world. Yes, we've had our differences in the past, but we've always found a way to get past them. As I've said before, if President Trump wants to usher in a new golden age for the United States, the better path is to partner with Canada, not to punish us. Canada has critical minerals, reliable and affordable energy, stable democratic institutions, shared values, and the natural resources you need. Canada has the ingredients necessary to build a booming and secure partnership for the North American economy, and we stand at the ready to work together. Let's take a moment to talk about our shared border. Our border is already safe and secure, but there's always always more work to do. Less than 1% of fentanyl, less than 1% of illegal crossings into the United States come from Canada. But hearing concerns from both Canadians and Americans, including the American president himself, we're taking action. We launched a $1.3 billion border plan that is already showing results, because we too are devastated by the scourge that is fentanyl, a drug that has torn apart communities and caused so much pain and torment for countless families across Canada, just like in the United States. A drug that we too want to see wiped from the face of this earth. A drug whose traffickers must be punished. As neighbors, we must work collaboratively to fix this. Unfortunately, the actions taken today by the White House split us apart instead of bringing us together. Tonight, I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives.
All right, Claudia, kick us off. You're up there by Canada, actually, so you know a thing or two about all this. You're also on the Ways and Means Committee, which has something to do with trade and so forth and so on. Your first thoughts and impressions about this tariff story?
Well, first of all, I agree with you, Larry. It is a national security issue. I do think that we need to change the behavior. We need to bring our supply chains back, and I think tariffs are going to help in that. And I think the issue with the tariffs is that we have to distinguish between when you're tariffing a commodity and something like automobiles, because I think it makes a big difference. When you look at, for example, in upstate New York, we have a lot of copper fabricators, and the United States relies on Canada and other countries for 42% or more of our copper supplies because we don't have the permitting or the ability to produce the copper we need for our own supply. So I think that a universal tariff would be more fair to the fabricators, for example, in my region, instead of a targeted just with Canada, because we do have good relationships. But I think I understand the overall goal, but I think there is a way to make them effective without actually causing massive carnage and loss of jobs and the ability to actually put out like essential, commodities like copper and the uses they have in the military and all kinds of resources that we have, medical supply, everything. So I think there's a lot to talk about. I'd be curious to see what the senator has to say, since he's from the North as well.
By the way, I'm always curious to see what the senator has to say. I just want to say that I've always favored the baseline tariff. I like the baseline tariff. You can raise a 10% baseline tariff would raise about $500 billion. We could use that $500 billion to cut taxes on American businesses and individuals, which is a nice swap. Anyway, let's all hear what Senator Kevin Cramer has to say about this.
Well, first of all, Larry, in your riff, you laid a good foundation, and certainly Representative Tenney has done a great job from her perspective. And I agree. I agree with both of you. I would say I think the tariffs on Canada will be short-lived. And the reason I say that is they didn't even wait for the final tally to come in November before they started making adjustments to meet the demands that President Trump has put on them. And they've come a long way, particularly in the area of fentanyl and the precursors and the regulations, those types of things. With regard to oil, Larry, you did a good job laying that out, but just give you some numbers. Canada only produces about 5 million barrels of oil per day. We buy 4 million of them. So we are literally 80% of their market. I don't know if oil will be carved out. I hope it is, for all the reasons you stated. Oil is tied directly to inflation, obviously. But so I hope there's a carve out there. But I spend a lot of time talking to Ambassador Hillman, Foreign Minister Jolie, several of the premiers, and there are many pro-Trump premiers, conservative premiers throughout Canada, who are struggling with this whole thing. So to Claudia's point about the relationship, we do need to keep this a strong relationship. That's why I think we'll come to a resolution quickly with Canada. Mexico, very different.
Very different story. And by the way, I mean, I think Mr. Trump would say that we're going to pick up our own energy production. So whatever short-term dislocations, they're just going to be short-term dislocations. Claudia, Tenney, let me ask you this. The China problem. You know, China, whatever goes wrong, China's got a piece of it. I mean, that's been the story now for many, many years. And Mr. Trump is clearly making one of the first of many China riposts. Now, China is sneaking into Mexico, right? They provide the raw materials for fentanyl and other drugs, which then get manufactured in Mexico, and I guess the cartels ship them across the border into the United States. China's investing heavily in Mexico. They're producing cheap steel, cheap cars, trying to sneak them over the border to avoid all the domestic content rules of USMCA. Something's got to be done. I mean, Mr. Trump put 10% tariff on China. I don't know that's the last that we'll see. But my point is, here's China inside Mexico. And I don't see the Mexicans, you know, having the Chinese abide by the USMCA rules, for example. And then what are they doing about the fentanyl problem coming across the southern border?
All great, Larry, because the biggest problem is China, because China uses its Belt and Road Initiative to leverage weaker countries, especially, and now Africa, South America. You see all these countries are leveraged by China. You know, you fly into Chile and there's like Chinese jets all over the place in the airport. They are making their way in, and we need to put pressure on Mexico. You know, then we also have to be able, and one of the things as part of the whole Trump plan is to become more powerful economically, massive growth, tax cuts. So we are the world's powerhouse again, economically, and obviously we have to, you know, with defense as well. But the economics is really important and really putting pressure on Mexico. That's why I think the tariffs, to the senator's point, the tariffs are really much more important on Mexico in the place where they are not complying. They're beholden to China, and they need to be, you know, they need to be beholden to us. We need to be the world's leader. And notice something else, Larry. The tariffs that President Trump put in place on China through the Biden administration are still in place.
New tariffs on Canada, Mexico, China set to take effect Tuesday. President Trump leveling that 25% tax on those countries. All three countries actually responding, saying that they will retaliate. I know China is getting an extra 10% tax. Joining me right now to discuss, right now we've got Democratic strategist Jonathan Harris and Republican strategist Matt Klink. Thank you both. I want to spare the audience some spin here and keep our time economic here, because obviously this tariff discussion has been much talked about. I mean, the administration is saying that this is indeed to help stop the flow of fentanyl into the country, among other things regarding our border. Matt, let's just play what if, tariffs end up raising prices for all of us across the board, but we have fewer overdose deaths of young people in this country. Will the economic plan that President Trump has in play backfire?
Adrian, the simple answer is that it depends. I mean, look, right now that if the numbers are shocking, that fentanyl is the #1 killer of men ages 18 to 40 right now. So, and I think what you heard Secretary Noam say at the border today, that, you know, the crime and dangerous drugs flowing across the border, primarily from Mexico, but to a lesser extent from Canada, nevertheless, necessitated this. The tariffs go into effect on Tuesday, and it could, I underscore could, have the potential to increase the cost of certain things. If the gain is better than the near-term price increase, or if Canada and Mexico come to the table and are serious about stopping the flow of crime and drugs flowing across the border, I think that everybody will ultimately end up winning. We've said all along that Trump's tariffs are a tactic to get people to negotiate because the status quo is not working.
Jonathan, if this tariff plan were to work and America becomes stronger in negotiating with our allies as well as our enemies, and lower the price of eggs, because we've heard that a lot this past couple of weeks, will we see more bipartisanship among at least moderate Democrats and Republicans?
I mean, that's a pretty big if. One of the things I said years ago when I was covering these topics is the International Monetary Fund said before COVID that we were headed for a recession. And the primary reason that they cited for the recession was Trump's trade war with China, these silly tariffs and the trade war that he started and then lost with China. And so if past is prologue, it's not going to work. It's going to, I mean, Donald Trump himself said recently, I think yesterday or today, that there should be some pain expected. And for the people that voted for him and actually believed him, which is stunning to me that anyone would, but that actually believed him, that he cared about the middle class and cared about lowering the price of groceries, I don't think that he campaigned on causing people pain. But that's what he's saying now by doing these completely voluntary tariffs that crashed our economy into a recession the last time he did it. So to answer your question, I don't know that they will work. If they do work, I think it'll be strongly based on the response of the constituencies of our people in office. Because if their constituencies are furious that they're having even more, the price of eggs is at a record high in groceries. If Donald Trump makes that worse, bipartisanship, if their constituencies are upset, is probably not on the table.
Matt, real quick question.
The price of eggs has. Yeah, the price of eggs has zero to do with Donald Trump. It's the Department of Agriculture mass killing 100 million chickens because of concerns over bird flu before Trump took office. No chickens, no eggs.
President Trump is apparently backing off of his threat to impose tariffs on one of at least America's three largest trading partners today, Mexico. The president made an agreement with Mexico's president to delay those tariffs by 1 month. Can you walk us through what else is included in that agreement?
Sure. There is one big negotiating win that led the president to pause those tariffs on Mexico for a month, and it is the fact that Mexico's president agreed to send about 10,000 Mexican soldiers to the Mexico side of the U.S.-Mexico border, specifically, President Trump says, to deal with the fentanyl problem and fentanyl being brought across the border into the U.S. And so that was apparently enough of a win for him to pause the tariffs that are supposed to go into effect tomorrow on all goods coming from Mexico into the United States for 1 month. And during that month, he said there will be continued negotiations between the Mexican government and Trump administration officials, including the Treasury Secretary. Apparently, there are other promises that President Trump would like to extract in exchange for a more long-term halt in these proposed tariffs.
Is that it?
No, there's more.
Everyone, you are watching live now from Fox. We appreciate everyone continuing to join us all right here. I'm your host, Mike Page. Always great to be with you as we continue to roll on. We do have some breaking news that we want to bring to you. We were just learning from Justin Trudeau that he's saying that the tariffs have been paused in Canada now for at least 30 days following the call with President Trump. That's coming from Lucas Tomlinson from Fox News are reporting that out there. So just like what we saw with Mexico earlier today with that pause, now we do know that Canada is doing the same pause with the United States here on trying to come up with better terms instead of using tariffs here. So once again, we did hear from President Trump earlier today. We'll play out some more of his remarks, but that was right before he was going to be speaking to Justin Trudeau. He felt confident that the same outcome would happen with Canada like it did with Mexico earlier today, and that's exactly what happened there. So again, major news coming out of the White House as Justin Trudeau just putting this out on X as well, saying, I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. And to continue on, saying I just had saying that also the nearly 10,000 frontline personnel and will be working on protecting the border as well. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I have also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be backing it with $200 million. Proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together there. So quite the change now from Canada after that call with President Trump. Now, Canada doing the same as with Mexico and pausing it for 30 days to try to work out a better deal there. But it looks like Canada already stepping up, just like how Mexico did with the 10,000 soldiers there at the border. So again, we will be keeping an eye on this major update coming out of the White House and beyond right here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you very much for seeing me twice today. It's going to be quite an important signing, so we thought we'd let you watch. If we could, I'd ask Will to explain the first, but really more importantly, explain the second, and we'll start signing. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Just 2 items for your signature today. The first is the formal commission appointing Chris Rochelot to be the Deputy Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration.
Right.
And since the commissioner position since the administrator position is currently vacant, he will act as the administrator since he's now been appointed deputy.
And he's a very capable guy.
Extremely experienced in aviation and highly regarded in the industry and in government. Second, for your signature, we have a presidential memorandum titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety. In light of the damage done to aviation safety by the Biden administration's DEI and woke policies, what this presidential memorandum orders is for your Secretary of Transportation and FAA Administrator, in this case acting FAA Administrator, to basically ensure that we are actively undoing all of that damage, that we are assessing how much damage was done, and that we're ensuring that people hired within the FAA, in keeping with your memorandum of January 21st, are only the most outstanding, capable people for the jobs that they're being hired into.
In other words, competence.
Yes, sir. Elevating competence over everything else instead of the DEI policies that were pursued by the Biden administration.
I think everyone understands that.
President, there's long been concerns about the amount of congestion out of DCA airport. Do you think that there's too many flights coming out of that airport?
No, I think we need very smart people running the flights and doing it. You know, the ones that aren't good, when they'll either do one of two things. They'll have too many coming in and they can't handle it, or they'll have the people waiting up in the air, which everyone's been caught in that situation, and circling the airports for an hour, and that's no good either.
Mr. President, are you aware?
Military helicopter training flights that are flying around National Airport all the time, what's your view? Should they be rolled back?
My view is fine if they're in the right locations and if they're not at the same levels. I mean, if a plane coming in is at 300 feet or 400 feet and a helicopter's training at 300 or 400 feet, why wouldn't they be up 500 feet higher? So I certainly want, and that to a certain extent is the air traffic controller. Wait, please, wait just a second.
You feel like what happened last night was preventable?
I do, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And obviously, that was something that should not have happened. And we're not going to let it happen again. Yes, please.
Mr. President, on a slightly different subject, on your Canada and Mexico tariffs, will oil be included or excluded from those tariffs?
So we'll be announcing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a number of reasons. Number one is the people that have poured into our country so horribly and so much. Number two are the drugs, fentanyl, and everything else that have come into the country. And number three are the massive subsidies that we're giving to Canada and to Mexico in the form of deficits. And I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada and separately 25% on Mexico. And we will really have to do that because we have very big deficits with those countries. Those tariffs may or may not rise with time.
Will oil be part of that, though? Because we get oil from Canada.
Oil is going to have nothing to do with it as far as I'm concerned. Oil has nothing to do with it.
Mr. President, you said regarding Guantanamo Bay, you want 30,000 new beds there. Is there a possibility that will increase, or is 30,000 the
It
maximum?
could increase, yes.
What would be the maximum?
It depends, but countries that won't take back their criminals that they sent into us, they sent them to us. They put them into the caravans, and they came in. As sure as you're standing there, they were sent by those countries. Then they're going to be met very harshly with sanctions, etc.
And when are you hoping to have Guantanamo Bay, this new facility, up and running?
It'll be up pretty quickly.
How much do you think it's going to cost?
Not very much. A lot of the structure is already there, as you know.
Mr. President, you said that incompetence may have played a role. Are you aware of any performance issues or disciplinary actions that were taken against anyone who was working the tower last night or flying the plane?
No, and I hope that's not the case in this case, but certainly over the years it's been the case. And it's the case with respect to close calls, and it's the case with respect to circling for hours on end. Planes circle a lot, and they circle because the people bringing them down, these people that have to be very, very smart, and it's not based on anything other than the brain. We need the smartest people. We need both psychologically smart and just brilliant, period. And we are going to have them in our control towers. We are going to have the most competent people in the country in our control towers, not people that are there for any other reason.
Sir, you said that you envision sending the 80-something thousand IRS agents hired under Biden to the border. What role do you see them playing?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I may do that, or I may use different people, but we're going to send more. We're going to give the Border Patrol some help. Although now, if you look, they've taken in the lowest number since my administration. The numbers are very low. And at that level, we don't need so much help. People know not to come, because if they come, they're not going to make it in, and they're going to be shipped out.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Matt Taglia, Senior Director of Emerson College Polling. Matt, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Within the first 10 days of Donald Trump's second term, Emerson College Polling has a new poll out that shows his approval rating. So to start off the conversation, what is it? What can you tell us?
Yeah, so we see that Trump's approval rating is 49% approve, 41% disapprove. And then there's another 10% who are neutral. This is the lowest disapproval that we've seen since his first term in our polls. I believe 41% was the lowest we saw then, and it's the lowest we see now. His final approval from his first term was somewhere in the 38 to 45% range, 55 to 60% disapprove. So this is obviously a huge step forward for Trump in terms of his image and the way in which folks are viewing his presidency.
It's a huge step forward, and you can even see that with social media. The tides are kind of turning with what's being posted about him, how people are interacting with his content. How does this compare to his first term, as you said, because it's a big bump? And secondly, is this common for a president in their second term to receive this bump?
Yeah, I don't know that we can really make a fair comparison, since his first term is separated by President Biden's term in office. So it's kind of hard to say. We don't usually see a bump quite like this between a president's first term and second term. Certainly some degree of better approval coming into January of the second term, but this is likely historic in terms of polling and the way in which he has rebounded. We see it in our poll, and we see it in some of the other polls that have come out since the inauguration. So again, major improvement in his image. When you combine that with his favorability rating, which we've tested over the past couple of months, we've seen steady improvement there. So this is probably the height of Trump's political capital right now.
When you're seeing these historic numbers, can you break it down by demo for us? Is he getting a bump from every group? What does that look like?
More or less, yes. A bump from every group. We see, that he has overall approval up and down the age brackets. So, this is really driven by Republicans, obviously. But we also see independents. You look at pluralities and majorities of folks who are under the age of 60 say that they approve of Donald Trump right now in his job performance. It's only when you look at folks who are over the age of 60 that you see a bit of a split. So, very close there, sort of 48 to 50 approve, disapprove, depending on the age bracket there. But those older folks are really the only ones where we see any sort of split in approval versus disapproval. We also see that women disapprove overall. I think that we can take cues from his first term and his performance among women in the 2024 election. But overall, again, this is up and down the board. Good news for Trump. He's very high in terms of favorability, his total political capital. He's seen very favorably by the electorate right now in relative terms.
We're signing a regulation bill, and you might want to discuss it, please. Somebody could explain it.
This is an executive order called Unleashing Prosperity Through Deregulation. So it slashes unnecessary regulations, which will put more money in Americans' pockets, unleash economic growth, and guarantee that the United States of America remains the strongest competitor on the world market. And in order to achieve that, this order requires a rigorous regulatory budget process. So for each new regulation issued, at least 10 prior regulations will be identified for elimination.
So 1 for 10. And that's never been done before. We came very close to doing it in the first term, and we'll be able to easily do it, I think, in this term, and that'll have a big impact on regulation, getting rid of so many ridiculous regulations. And very importantly, Doug Burgum and Catherine, incredible governor of North Dakota, as you know, and did a really great job. And I asked him to serve as the Department of Energy, the secretary, and he has agreed to do it. And in many ways, the United States, I guarantee it's going to prove to be correct, that the United States is very lucky to have them, because they're a great team, great man and wife, great talent. So we are going to be working, and you're going to be working very hard with Chris Wright over at Energy. And we have a lot of land. We have more land than anybody else in the world that has energy under it, namely, I call it liquid gold, but oil and gas and other things. And he'll be seeking that out, and he's going to help our country to become extremely liquid and extremely wealthy again. And I don't think it'll take too long. He's ready to go, right? He just got approved, as you know, by the Senate. So it was pretty good. We want to thank everybody, and we want to thank Senator Thune for moving it along. And if you could give me his commission, we'll sign it. Thank you very much. And if you'd like to ask a question of the new secretary, it's a very interesting title, but it's a pretty great title, right?
Yes.
Cabinet member and everything else.
What is your first priority as Secretary of Interior, sir?
Well, as you've heard President Trump say, we have to turn the ship around. If Interior was a public company, its stock would be in the tank. Revenue has been declining. Production of revenue for American taxpayers is down. The deregulation order, executive order, which President Trump just signed, extremely important, because we have to shorten the time that it takes to build things in America. And not only do we have to produce more energy, we've got to produce more critical minerals in this country, and we're talking across the whole country, including Alaska especially, a big opportunity. Interior, if it was a company, has the largest balance sheet in the world. 500 million acres of public land, 700 million acres of subsurface, over 2 billion of offshore acres. These are all assets that belong to the American people. We all talk about the debt that America has, this 36 trillion. We have perhaps hundreds of trillions of dollars of assets that we need to manage smartly, sustainably, for the benefit and the use of the American people.
Next, this is an executive order. Discharges your Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and your Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, to begin a process that will hopefully result in the creation of an American sovereign wealth fund.
It's a very exciting event. We're going to have a sovereign wealth fund, which we've never had. We have a lot of things that create wealth, and you're seeing that over the last 2 weeks. I think we've created more wealth. Other people have created de-wealth, the people, my predecessors. We're creating a lot of wealth. Scott, maybe you'd like to say something about it, and I'd ask also Howard to say something about it.
Yes, sir. This is very exciting. We're going to stand this thing up within the next 12 months. We're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people. We're going to put the assets to work, and I think it's going to be very exciting. We're going to study best practices that's done around the world. It'll be a combination of liquid assets, assets that we have in this country as we work to bring them out for the American people.
The extraordinary size and scale of the U.S. government and the business it does with companies should create value for American citizens. If we are going to buy 2 billion COVID vaccines, maybe we should have some warrants and some equity in these companies and have that grow for the help of the American people. So I bring all these things together. I think Scott and I will create an amazing sovereign wealth fund for you, sir.
And there's also a freeze on foreign aid. And this is, again, incredibly important to ensure that this administration is taking into consideration how hard the American people are working. And their tax dollars actually matter to this administration. You know, just during this pause, DOGE and OMB have actually found that there was $37 million that was about to go out the door to the World Health Organization, which is an organization, as you all know, that President Trump, with the swipe of his pen in that executive order, is no longer wants the United States to be a part of. So that wouldn't be in line with the president's agenda. DOGE and OMB also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza.
That's fucked up, man.
Dozens of federal government agencies are registered but don't even exist. In fact, some agencies listed were only temporary or have been long gone for decades. Joining us this morning to discuss is the Deputy Public Policy Editor for OpenTheBooks.com, Rachel O'Brien. Good morning to you, Rachel. Always good to see you. Now, this is important as the DOGE committee looks to cut wasteful government spending, obviously. Just how many federal agencies are there, and what exactly is the status of the ones that are now defunct?
Yeah, so we're talking about the Federal Register. That's the official journal of the U.S. government. It's where all the rules and public notices can be found. You can find executive orders. So it lists 441 agencies, but almost 1/5 of them, 75 of them, are effectively defunct or obsolete. So 39 of those agencies were temporary commissions. They were created to study maybe a single issue and produce a report. For example, the Commission on the Future of the U.S. Aerospace Industry, 21st Century Workforce Commission. Those were all temporary, but they're all still listed there. 12 agencies have closed. They've had their duties merged with another agency. For instance, the Oklahoma City National Memorial Trust and the Valles Caldera Trust, those were separate entities. They're now part of the National Park Service, but they're still listed on the Federal Register. So if the federal government were a book, there would really be no usable table of contents for the average American to find what they're seeking.
Isn't that wild? But in order for DOGE or anyone else to make a roadmap for cutting wasteful spending, there needs to be obviously an accurate picture of federal agencies. So how is your organization, how is Open the Books doing this?
Yeah, so this is shockingly bad record keeping, especially for the official record keeper of the U.S. government. Yeah. So, they're not updated. So members of the public, you have to do deep research to find out about the composition of their own government. So Open the Books is going to periodically release a list of agencies. There are 366 agencies that are receiving federal funds. So we will have studied which ones these are. We're going to chart their growth, their expense, and activity over time to determine if taxpayers are getting their money's worth and if they're even getting anything at all out of these agencies. So we're going to keep tabs on this and hoping DOGE will delete these obsolete agencies.
And for those agencies that are now defunct, where's that money going? That's
right.
The bigger
Well, some
question.
of them get funding. A lot of them don't, but some do still get funding. President Biden was still funding. His budget request had some of these entities in it before he left office.
And we're watching DOGE because they're working around the clock to cut our bloated government. They're trying to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. We got an update from JD Vance, and he likes what he sees so far.
DOGE is going to do, it's going to save money. And I really believe it's already identified a lot of cost savings. The most important thing that it's going to do, I don't even think is the cost savings. It's making the bureaucracy responsive to the elected president. We're talking about making the people's government responsive to the people's elected president.
But not everybody was happy with the cuts, especially not federal bureaucrats. They're scared stiff. Fear and chaos grip federal workers as Trump rapidly remakes the government. Cheryl, he came in, he said he was going to do this. He's doing it. He actually was kind of graceful in the amount of time that he gave those federal workers, where he said, you know, you can take the buyout. We'll pay you for till the end of September. Some people thought that was very generous, but he's doing what he said. He's doing what he promised the American people, what they voted for.
Well, and, you know, the whole return to the office part of that conversation is pretty clear. You know, Senator Joni Ernst was the first to come out and clearly say to all of us, only 6% of the federal workforce is actually in the office. That's number one. Number two, all the real estate, start to sell that off. There are already moves happening in Washington and Congress to make this happen as far as the real estate picture goes. But, you know, tying this back to energy and the tariffs and the economy and what would make us stronger as a nation, besides fiscal responsibility and not having these massive debt payments that we're paying right now because of the trillions of dollars that we're running in deficits in this nation, the best part of what J.D. Vance is saying is not only are we going to make our country stronger and more energy efficient, you know, an energy emergency, as Donald Trump has called it, but also we're going to run as a leaner, meaner entity. Called a corporation, called Donald Trump the CEO. I don't have a problem with that. But this is where these business practices can be effectively applied, in my opinion, to the bureaucracy that is the federal government.
Yeah, we were talking about the kinds of people he's picked in his cabinet. He's got a lot of advisors, David, who are business people. Somebody like Howard Lutnick has a lot of experience running a company. And that is the perfect way to describe how he's treating all of this, and there are so many moving parts that he's putting together. It's not just about DOGE or just about tariffs or just about oil or just about inflation. They are putting the whole wheel together.
Well, there's so many business people who understand that it's not just the number of workers, it's what they're working on. You have 2.8 million federal workers. That's the federal workforce. How many of them are working on projects that don't make lives better in America, but make them worse? It's like the EV. A lot of these companies were forced to have, a lot of the car companies were forced to have EV divisions. How many of them, now that they're free, are going to get rid of the divisions that were bleeding money? Many of them already were doing, even at the risk of making the federal government mad at them. So the point is how much of what those federal workers are doing, it's not whether they're loyal to the president who's in power at any moment. It's whether they're doing things involved in programs that are bad for America, whether it's the Department of Education, HHS, or wherever. So I really think what part of what DOGE has to do is not just talk about how many workers are going to fire, but how many divisions, how many parts of the government they've got to eliminate. And you've got to get into that. And people say, oh, we can't get rid of things like Department of Education. Too many people, there'd be starving children all over as a result of that. No, there are parts of the Department of Education that make things worse for students in America, and they have to be eliminated.
Hallelujah! Amen. God bless. Amen. Hallelujah.
Today, the Post broke news that the highest-ranking career official at Treasury, a man named David Liebrick, is leaving the U.S. government, quote, after a clash with allies of billionaire Elon Musk over access to sensitive payment systems. So Elon Musk and his team of people have reportedly been asking Treasury for access to the payment systems that the government uses to pay its bills, to pay out trillions of dollars a year across the federal government. Also payments to businesses and individual households. So if you're a federal worker, before your paycheck hits your bank account, it goes through the system. Same thing if you get a Social Security check or a Medicare benefit. Payments to government contractors, tax refunds, grant recipients. You get the idea. This is basically the government's checkbook at the Treasury Department, how they pay for everything. It's so sensitive that only a few career officials actually have access to use this system. But according to the Post today, Elon Musk and his team have demanded access to it as well, which led to a dispute with a very high-ranking career official at Treasury who's now quit over this dispute, who's now resigned. The Post says it is unclear what exactly Elon Musk's team wanted to do, why they wanted access to this incredibly sensitive system.
Would you like me to explain?
You gotta help me cut the budget a little.
you got to cut the budget.
Yeah, about $650 million.
I've been over this stuff a bunch of times. It just doesn't add up. Who does these books? I mean, if I ran my business this way, I'd be out of business.
Developing tonight, 2 top security officials at the U.S. Agency for International Development were put on administrative leave last night. The move came after they refused to allow officials from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, to access security systems, personnel files, and classified information. DOGE was successful in the end, getting access to sensitive Treasury data, including Social Security and Medicare customer payment systems. The move by DOGE means it could have wide leeway to access important taxpayer data, among other things. The New York Times first reported the news of the group's access of the massive federal payment system. The 2 people, though, who interviewed with the Associated Press spoke under condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly.
The 2 top security officials at the U.S. Agency for International Development were put on leave for standing up to officials from the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency. The pair refused to allow DOGE officials, led by Elon Musk, to access their systems at the agency. DOGE personally, physically attempted to access the U.S. aid headquarters in Washington, D.C., but they were stopped. Sources say they wanted access to security systems and files. Some insiders say President Trump plans to sign an executive order to fold that agency into the U.S. State Department. That's a move Democrats say is illegal. This follows DOGE officials gaining access to sensitive Treasury data, including Social Security and Medicare customer payment systems.
What Trump and Musk have done is not only wrong, it's illegal. USAID was established by an act of Congress, and it can only be disbanded by an act of Congress. Stopping this will require action by the courts and for Republicans to show up and show courage and stand up for our country.
We're here today not only to fight for federal employees who dedicate themselves every day to a humanitarian task. We are here to save lives because that is what AID does. You name it, AID is there. In the fight against HIV, in the fight to protect the Uyghur population in China, in the fight to protect refugees, in the fight to make sure that there's food security everywhere, AID is there. It is the lead development agency in the world. And no one elected Elon Musk to dismantle it.
Billionaire Elon Musk has flexed his political muscles while taking aim at the U.S. Agency for International Development. During an X Spaces discussion today, the billionaire said that President Trump agreed that the agency should be shut down. And this morning, staffers of USAID were told not to come into the agency's Washington headquarters, with yellow police tape and officers blocking the lobby. Overnight, more than 600 employees reported being locked out of computer systems. In the 2 weeks Trump has been in office, the war against USAID has already seen thousands of employees laid off and programs shut down. Joining me now is the Hill's national political reporter, Julia Manchester. Julia, thank you so much for joining us. The agency's website shut down, as we mentioned. Employees ordered not to show up to work. Elon Musk, for his part, has said that USAID is a criminal organization that should be shut down. What's at stake here?
Yeah, so it's interesting because over the weekend we heard Elon Musk sort of previewing how he believes USAID is a failure and we could see some shutdown in the future, or he was saying that's what he would like to see. And he said that President Trump agreed with him. The only issue, though, is that while President Trump has really hammered USAID and has said that it's, essentially run by, people who are radical on foreign policy, we haven't seen President Trump go as far to say it should be shut down. In fact, more of the Trump administration folks we've chatted with have suggested that it would be reorganized or moved under the State Department. And we do know that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has been made acting director of the agency. So going forward, though, this is a big deal because we know that, out of all the other countries in the world, the U.S. is the #1 provider of foreign aid. So that could definitely bring some major changes to recipients of foreign aid going forward.
Elon Musk and the DOGE team are looking at how much money the federal government spends, and he posted this on X. The DOGE team discovered, among other things, that the payment approval officers at Treasury were instructed always to approve payments, even to known fraudulent or terrorist groups. They literally never denied a payment in their entire careers, not even once. What do you make of Elon Musk going through Washington right now with a Hoover?
I'm okay with it. And I think the American people are okay with it. Everybody knows the dirty little secret about government. It drips with fat. No one's ever done an exercise like this. I thought he'd get a lot more pushback from Congress, and he's not. He's going in there with a spatula, and he's scraping out billions of dollars, and people are okay with it. After all, it's taxpayers' money. Right. Why not do this? If you sit around your kitchen table, you got to have a budget every year. Right. Why can't we apply the same kind of philosophy to government? And that's why he's getting a lot of latitude and a lot of slack, even though he's a controversial guy. But look at the executional skills he has. Sure. There's nobody like him. Let him do his thing.
I mean, my frustration with USAID goes back to my time in Congress. It's a completely unresponsive agency. It's supposed to respond to policy directives of the State Department, and it refuses to do so. So the functions of USAID, there are a lot of functions of USAID that are going to continue, that are going to be part of American foreign policy, but it has to be aligned with American foreign policy. I said very clearly during my confirmation hearing that every dollar we spend and every program we fund, that will be aligned with the national interest of the United States. And USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that there's somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars. And so I'm very troubled by these reports that they've been unwilling to cooperate with people who are asking simple questions about what does this program do, who gets the money, who are our contractors, who's funded. And that sort of level of insubordination makes it impossible to conduct a sort of mature and serious review that I think foreign aid writ large should have. We're spending taxpayer money here. These are not donor dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. And we owe the American people the assurances that every dollar we are spending abroad is being spent on something that furthers our national interest. And so far, a lot of the people that work at USAID have just simply refused to cooperate. Are you currently in charge of USAID? I'm the acting director of USAID. I've delegated that authority to someone, but I stay in touch with him. And again, our goal was to go in and align our foreign aid to the national interest. But if you go to mission after mission and embassy after embassy around the world, you will often find that in many cases, USAID is involved in programs that run counter to what we're trying to do in our national strategy with that country or with that region. That cannot continue. USAID is not an independent, non-governmental entity. It is an entity that spends taxpayer dollars, and it needs to spend it, as the statute says, in alignment with the policy directives that they get from the Secretary of State, the National Security Council, and the President. And it's been 20 or 30 years where people have tried to reform it, and it refuses to reform. It refuses to cooperate. When we were in Congress, we couldn't even get answers to basic questions about programs. That will not continue. That's not going to continue.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here, of course, with our Secretary of Transportation designee, Mr. Duffy, and his beautiful family, all 9 kids. I joke that these guys are doing their best to solve the fertility crisis in the United States of America. And just a beautiful family, and it's really a testament and a credit to our great country that such a family is willing to serve, first, of course, in Congress, and now at Secretary of Transportation. I think that I'm not being too mean to our predecessors in saying that we spent a lot of money in the last administration, but didn't get a lot out of it. And I think we're going to have a Secretary of Transportation here who is a much better steward of taxpayer dollars, but also make sure those taxpayer dollars are spent wisely and actually go to the places that the administration needs them to go. So we're thrilled that you're willing to serve, of course, thrilled by the President's nominating you, and grateful to our Senate colleagues, especially Senator Blackburn, Senator Sullivan here, for making it possible for you not to just be the nominee, but now the actual Secretary of Transportation. But first, before that, you've got to take this oath of office. So let's go ahead and do that. If you would, put your hand on the Bible and raise your right hand. I, Sean Duffy.
I, Sean Duffy.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely,
that I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office about which I am to enter.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
Well, Mr. Vice President, thank you for taking the time to swear us in today. I'm so appreciative of that. I want to take a moment and thank probably the greatest president we've had in our lifetime, but maybe the greatest president ever, Donald J. Trump, for giving me this amazing opportunity to serve as a secretary in this administration in the Department of Transportation. I am very grateful for his trust. I want to thank my wife, Rachel, who has been with me for 25 years. How she's lasted so long, I'm not quite sure, but I'm grateful for that. And our 9 kids, 7 of them are with us today, so thank you to them. The senators who are here, Sullivan and Blackburn, your support, I'm so grateful to and for the committee and their support and help as we've gone through the process. Thank you for that. And to my Sherpa team, who has been so helpful in getting us through the process. Everyone says it's a hard process. And you don't really know how hard it is until you actually go through it personally. But just if I take a moment, we are going to usher in the golden age of transportation. We're going to work on efficiency, making sure our infrastructure actually works for the American people, for the American family, making sure that you can get to and from work, back to your family in a timely fashion. We're going to work on congestion, work on an airspace that is more efficient, getting people to fly in airplanes and not wait in terminals is our mission. But I think we're in an amazing time as well, because when you think of the Department of Transportation, you don't think of innovation, and we are in one of the most innovative spaces, I think, in government, Mr. Vice President, whether it's with drones or autonomous vehicles or eVTOLs, or to say Ubers in the air, another term for them. But we are in a race to beat the rest of the world, and to make sure we have rules in place that are going to make America the best home for this innovation is critical. We are going to work on that at the Department of Transportation. 47,000 employees strong. I guess that's not going to grow at all with the new executive order, but it's a great team, and I look forward to working with them. And again, I'm honored that you did this today, Mr. Vice President. I'm honored for the President and his trust that he's placed in me. And with that, let's get to work. Thank you.
The yeas are 56, the nays are 42. The nomination is confirmed. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid upon the table, and the President will immediately notify of the Senate's action.
New tonight, the Senate confirmed former New York Representative Lee Zeldin to head the Environmental Protection Agency today. The 44-year-old will carry out President Trump's orders to roll back environmental regulations the administration opposes. Zeldin is the 7th member of Trump's cabinet to be confirmed this term.
So according to Fox News Capitol Hill correspondent Chad Pergram, we are learning right now, speaking of President Trump's cabinet, that a confirmation vote, a final confirmation vote, is taking place right now as we speak for President Trump's pick to lead the the Department of Interior. And that's, of course, his pick for that role was former North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. The Republican, of course, his one-time presidential primary rival. But once Trump won the election back in November, he tapped Burgum to lead the department there. I want to put this up from Chad Pergram here on social media, saying that the Senate has confirmed Doug Burgum as Interior Secretary. The vote, 79 yeas, 18 nays. He says now they are voting to break the filibuster on the nomination of Chris Wright as Energy Secretary. So President Trump's cabinet is slowly but surely getting filled out here as we speak. So wanted to make sure we got that for you. As you know, here all week on Live Now, we have been monitoring all of these cabinet confirmation votes, and that becomes the latest. Former North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum now confirmed to be President Trump's next Secretary of the Interior.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, are you ready?
And this morning, immigration raids do continue across the United States. We're seeing the impacts right here at home.
We are. Pix 11 Julie Millay right now joining us with how some of these communities are seeing a changing situation because of these trends.
Yeah, we heard of reported raids in different cities in New Jersey. The mayor of Paterson yesterday telling us that he was afraid people were going to stop going to school, going to work. And now he says that's happening. He said he's getting reports of people not going about their daily activities because they fear an ICE agent could walk through the door. Border Czar Tom Homan says nothing's going to stop these agents from coming after undocumented immigrants.
But I don't know. That's why I'm nervous.
This mother did send her 3 kids to school in Paterson yesterday, but not without fear. Immigration officials say they arrested nearly 1,200 people on Thursday. In Paterson, word of 2 recent reported ICE raids traveled fast.
I got people calling me, should I carry my resident card? Should I carry my birth certificate? Should I carry my United States citizen certificate?
Paterson City Council member Luis Velez telling Pix 11 News he's hearing from documented citizens in Paterson, where Latinos make up 63% of the population, that even they're afraid of what might happen, as the Trump administration and Border Czar Tom Homan say they're only going to ramp up their efforts.
We're going to keep doing what we're doing. Every day we're going to be out there. We're going to prioritize criminal threats, national security threats. Then we're going to start opening the aperture to others.
In lower Manhattan, with what we know about what just happened there, Gabi.
Good morning, Michael, to you, to Darlene, and to our viewers. We're live outside of 36 Federal Plaza as we follow up on the arrival in New York City of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Noem, the secretary, posted a message on X at 4:43 this morning saying, we are doing this right, doing exactly what President Donald Trump promised the American people, making our streets safe. Live this AM from NYC, I am on it. The Department of Homeland Security put out this video of an ICE arrest in New York City moments ago, a DHS official alleging that the suspect had criminal history, including kidnapping, assault, and burglary charges, plus, Michael and Darlene, an outstanding warrant apparently in Colorado. This all comes as we're learning that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement made 1,200 arrests on Sunday, the highest single-day number since the start of President Trump's second term in office. Nearly half of those arrested had not committed any crimes, though, and were detained because they lacked legal authorization to remain in the United States. Looking at the latest numbers here in New York City, more than 300 new asylum seekers arrived last week. As we bring you back live outside of 26 Federal Plaza, this is information from the New York City Mayor's office saying that there are over 47,000 migrants in the homeless shelter system, housed in over 180 different humanitarian shelters and 13 relief centers. This all comes also, Michael and Darlene, as Mayor Adams has been asked by a Republican senator to come to Congress to talk about sanctuary policies here in New York City. But the latest here, ICE arrests apparently happening as we speak, and the DHS secretary arriving in the city for follow-up on these cases.
Look at the top stories breaking at 8. We're going to start with the new Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. She's in New York City this morning for an ICE operation. Senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katurski has the latest on that. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, George. Overnight, federal agents and NYPD officers poured into an apartment in the High Bridge section of the Bronx where a purported migrant gang member was arrested. Agents and officers, you can see there, going into the apartment in an operation personally witnessed by newly sworn-in Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. She arrived in New York City early this morning to accompany personnel from multiple federal agencies, tweeting photos, videos, and a message, and we're quoting here, that dirt bags like this will continue to be removed from our streets. The individual taken into custody in the Bronx is facing kidnapping, assault, and burglary charges in connection with a home invasion at an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado last month that police blamed on a Venezuelan gang. And sources familiar with today's operations in New York tell us that Noem is expected to witness other immigration enforcement actions as agents detain undocumented migrants targeted for deportation. New York City, is one of several so-called sanctuary cities where federal authorities are conducting operations meant to expedite the removal of millions of undocumented immigrants.
Now joining me is the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who has an exclusive announcement on more action her department is taking. Secretary, thanks for being with us here today. I understand you have something to share with us that we haven't heard yet about what you're going to be doing at DHS.
Yes, well, thank you, Will, for inviting me to be with you. Today, we are announcing that we have stopped all grant funding that's being abused by NGOs to facilitate illegal immigration into this country. So it's amazing to me the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent by the federal government that has been sent to NGOs to facilitate this invasion of our country. So I've taken action to stop those funds, to reevaluate them, and to make sure that we're actually using the taxpayer dollars in a way that strengthens this country, that keeps us safe. So I think people are curious when we look at grants that are given out by federal agencies at how they're utilized, and that evaluation needs to be done. We're not spending another dime to help the destruction of this country. We're going to make sure that we follow through on what President Trump has promised, and that's to make sure that we're securing our border, departing those who are here illegally, and committing criminal actions, and that our taxpayer dollars aren't spent to help it.
And Madam Secretary, I don't think people fully understand the role that NGOs play, many NGOs play, in facilitating illegal immigration. I just want to share these numbers with everybody up on the screen. We spend over $380 million, did in 2024, for sheltering and service programs for illegal immigrants. But the vast network of NGOs that help facilitate it through Panama, through Mexico, and make it a landing spot here in the United States is a massive contributor here to illegal immigration. So what you're telling us today is that now stops? At least the federal funding of that stops?
Yes, through the Department of Homeland Security, we have stopped spending those dollars to fund those NGOs. And, well, what's been so revealing is that many of these NGOs actually have infrastructure and operations set up in Mexico on that side of the border that are telling those illegal immigrants to come to them, and they will get them across the border. So they're not just operating in the United States, they're operating outside of the United States to help make it easier for those who want to break our laws.
Right.
And well, I was one of those Americans that years ago, when somebody said NGO to me, I thought, oh, that's amazing. That's a nonprofit that's out there telling somebody about Jesus or spreading faith and salvation or doing good work and charitable work, helping people that are less fortunate. And then I realized over the years it's been perverted into this shadow government. An NGO is sometimes an operation that does things that the government cannot do, can't legally do. So they create an entity to use government dollars, taxpayer dollars, to do something that the federal government isn't allowed to do, to do a shadow government operation that really has been used recently to undermine our country's national security.
You guys think you're above the law, but you ain't above the line.
In journalism, you learn to be very careful when you think you have the story oh so perfect. And New York Magazine did. They thought they had MAGA World by the tail. So here's the cover: the cruel kids table among the young, confident, and casually cruel Trumpers who, after conquering Washington, have their sights set on America. The article itself suggests it was a white-only event. Author Brock Collier quotes, "Have you noticed the entire room is white?" An older woman in an updo and a silver sequin gown asked me, though it wasn't entirely clear whether she thought that was a good thing or a bad thing. So let's look at that cover again. It doesn't show the full picture. The photo agency wouldn't let us show the actual picture. But the full photo shows a number of black guests at the event. They were cropped out for the cover. New York Magazine wanted to hit at the toxic, white, straight, masculine power of MAGA. Our guest doesn't need to see the full photo. He was there with us now, host of the Can't Cancel Rob Smith podcast and Right Turn Strategies consultant Rob Smith, who was at the party. Welcome to the show.
I was.
Thanks
for having me. Absolutely.
Was it a fun time?
Oh, God, it was a great time. Yeah.
You think that was intentional?
Oh, I think it was absolutely intentional. Look, the writer went there with the story in his mind. He knew that the story that he wanted to tell about MAGA, about Trump supporters, about Inauguration Weekend, whatever you want to call it.
What was the story you think he wanted to tell?
The story that he wanted to tell was a story that all of MAGA, all of Trump supporters are all young, white, toxic, intimated that these were racists. You know, that was implied in the writing of the article. So that's the story that this writer wanted to tell. It wasn't the reality of the situation at all. I was there with a number of other black conservative media influencers. There were all kinds of people at that party.
What a bunch of dumbasses.
Yeah, really. Jasmine Crockett, she is the vice-ranking member on the House Oversight Committee and now a newly minted member of the DOGE subcommittee. The question is, does Musk's team now have the power to actually disrupt federal payments?
In my opinion, they do, but I honestly don't know. We still don't know really what DOGE is in the first place. I mean, listen, think about it like this, Alex. You know, everyone hates Congress. That's just what it is, right? But as a sitting member of Congress, I mean, I had to give up my ability to practice law. I am prevented from being able to practice law to prevent potentially somebody dropping a load of cash on me and I do something that is nefarious as one of 435. And now we're talking about a guy who literally gets government contracts from the United States and has not had to divest, has not had to, I mean, it is really awful. And I know right now people are asking whether or not their IRS refund checks are going to be affected. We don't know if this is more DEI. Are you going to say if it's somebody that's a person of color, then for some reason, whatever they paid in to the federal government, they're not allowed to get it back?
Did you eat a lot of paint chips when you were a kid?
We start that interview with something really minor.
A Dalton, Illinois town board meeting erupted into chaos after the mayor, Tiffany Henyard, well, in this case, she's a supervisor of the town, jumped into the middle of a fight between her boyfriend and an activist who attended the official government function. Now, her boyfriend did that after the activist used a derogatory word to refer to Tiffany Henyard, and we'll get to the brawl and more details about it in just a second. But if you're unfamiliar with Henyard, we actually began reporting on her almost a year ago for sending this small town in the Chicago suburbs into nearly $7 million into debt. And when I say small town, I really do mean small town. So $7 million in the red is really bad news for this town. And we're not talking about a rich community either, right? So in Dalton, which shares a border with Chicago, about 15% of families live in poverty, census records show, burdened with some of the highest property taxes in Cook County. Homeowners feel the full brunt of the tax burden since there's little commercial or industrial development in the town. And there's only 20,000 people, give or take, living in the town. Henyard wears two hats in local government. As the Dalton mayor, she takes home more than $46,000 in base pay. And as the supervisor of Thornton Township, she makes more than $200,000 a year, records show. Now, there have been a number of allegations against her. She is not popular with the people of Dalton because they can see through some of the scams that she has allegedly engaged in, including funneling taxpayer money to her cancer charity, which appears to not have been a real charity at all, using taxpayer money on hair and makeup prior to public appearances, trips to Atlanta, Austin, New York City, where she would frequently fly first class and stay in ritzy hotels. In fact, so she taken during Henyard's term ran the city over $67,000. So $67,000 so far spent on her trips. Usually when local politicians say that they're taking these trips, or when they try to justify why they're taking the trips, they'll say that it's to stimulate businesses within their jurisdiction, right? To convince possible business owners to move to their jurisdiction and stimulate job growth and stuff like that. By the way, Lori Lightfoot, of all people, who now works as a lawyer in the private sector, was called on to do an audit of the township, and she obviously found some misuse of public funds. Also misusing police services 24/7 as her personal security detail, and paying the cops an insane amount of money in overtime as a result of that. Using taxpayer money to lease a Chevy Tahoe for herself, and she did overpay for it by a lot. And she's been called out multiple times, each time trying to lie her way through it, right? So the town is done with her. They're sick of her. And so it's important to know that context and the backdrop of this brawl that broke out recently. So all of that brings us to what happened during Tuesday's township meeting. So township trustee Stephanie Wiedemann helped usher in audits and investigations of township departments and officials, items trustees previously lacked the votes to approve. Now, following discussion of complaints against members of Henyard's administration, William Moore and Kamal Woods, in closed-door sessions, the board also voted to put the two on paid administrative leave. Now, Kamal Woods is an important element to the story. He happens to be Henyard's boyfriend. She appointed him to handle youth programs, and it appears that he just collected public funds and did nothing. At least that's what the allegations are. And things erupted into chaos after an activist by the name of Jedediah Brown went in on Tiffany Henyard during the public comment period. He said, quote, "You've been a half-assed mayor, but if you wanted to get up here and earn some respect, then you should have been able to respond to Lori Lightfoot's report about credit cards." And that's a reference to the audit, which found that Tiffany Henyard used these, the town's credit cards for her own personal use and charged hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. Jedediah Brown, the activist, further said, "And I'm going to give away the rest of my time because I think on behalf of the Black Cookout Association that we better take a vote, that we're going to exchange your black ass for Stephanie to be the newer member. So all those against it say nay, all those in favor say aye." So as you can imagine, the majority of people said yay, like we want this, definitely. Well, after that, Jedediah Brown unfortunately said, "You gone, bitch." And that's when things devolved further. That's when Woods, Tiffany Henyard's boyfriend, and Brown began throwing punches at each other, which led to others joining in on the fight, including Henyard herself.
The Justice Department just the last hour charged a former senior Federal Reserve official with conspiracy to commit economic espionage. The justice says a 63-year-old John Harold Rogers is alleged to have passed, quote, sensitive trade secret information from the Federal Reserve to co-conspirators in China. Rogers was said specifically to solicit briefing books for governors, proprietary data sets, and sensitive information about FOMC deliberations. Apparently, he printed this info out or sent it to his personal email in violation of Federal Reserve rules in preparation for trips to China. Rogers allegedly made false statements to the Federal Reserve's Inspector General about accessing and passage of this information, as well as its association with co-conspirators. He worked as a Fed senior advisor in the Division of International Finance from 2010 to 2021. These alleged actions ran from 2013 to 2025. In the indictment, it says that's even after he left the Fed. The Justice Department says the info was passed that Rogers passed was, quote, economically valuable. They went on to say that the data provided could allow China to manipulate US markets. He provided info, quote, under the guise of teaching classes. The indictment cites two unnamed co-conspirators who the indictment says worked for the Chinese intelligence apparatus and presented themselves as graduate students. He was paid $450,000 in 2023 as a part-time professor at a Chinese university. The Fed declined to make any public comments about this, and the Federal Reserve Inspector General, who was involved in this but is quoted in this, could not immediately be reached for comment, Melissa.
Well, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt hosted her first press briefing yesterday at just 27 years of age. She's the youngest press secretary in history, and conservatives were thrilled with her performance. With an impressive command of the facts and a praiseworthy ability to recall details from memory without consulting a binder of notes, she was able to shut down mainstream media talking points over and over again yesterday. But the biggest challenge to the mainstream media reporters in the room was that they could soon have serious competition. That's because Leavitt announced she was restoring the press passes of 440 journalists whose ability to attend the briefings was revoked by the Biden administration. She's also inviting podcasters, bloggers, social media influencers, and everybody who falls under the umbrella of alternative media content creators to apply for White House press credentials for the first time. Let's listen to that announcement.
This White House believes strongly in the First Amendment, so it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House. And you can apply now on our new website, whitehouse.gov/newmedia. Starting today, this seat in the front of the room, which is usually occupied by the press secretary's staff, will be called the new media seat. My team will review the applications and give credentials to new media applicants who meet our criteria and pass United States Secret Service requirements to enter the White House complex. So in light of these announcements, our first questions for today's briefing will go to these new media members whose outlets, despite being some of the most viewed news websites in the country, have not been given seats in this room.
True to her word, those first two questions went to Axios, a new media venture with a liberal bent, and Breitbart News, a massive conservative online news website. Now, Leavitt's announcement is a game changer and a sign that the mainstream media will no longer be able to use their gatekeeping power to constrain the range of acceptable commentary and questioning that takes place in that briefing room. I can't say it any better than former Rising host Sagar Enjeti, who correctly rails against the White House Correspondents Association as, quote, a cartel of largely failing MSM outlets who use legacy rules to gatekeep and force out competition. Literally, their last gasp of relevance is in White House coverage, and if you bypass them from the jump, it will accelerate the decline. Indeed, that cartel, the White House Correspondents Association, gets to determine the seating chart in the briefing room, and thus has all sorts of power to direct, steer, even control the narrative within the room. Challenging its authority means challenging the authority of the failing legacy media's authority, and that's a good thing. It's also a good thing that this White House recognizes the importance of alternative media. And in alternative media platforms like YouTube, which you're watching right now perhaps, Spotify, Instagram, even TikTok, something Democrats are now associated with trying to ban, Trump is associated with saving. Indeed, if you want to understand why the right is suddenly succeeding with young people, why Donald Trump, of all people, improved the GOP's image among the under 30 crowd, look no further than MAGA's wholesale embrace of podcasters and social media influencers. Democrats need to up their game if they want to compete, because right now, young people see the Democrats as the party of older people, the party of the people who follow rules, who trust experts, who think legacy sources of information are A-OK, who are wildly in favor of the national security establishment, the mainstream media, the higher education system, world government, mass migration, and so on. It's a coalition of, to use a term that's popular with the very young, very online right now, NPCs, i.e. non-playable characters. Some of you probably know this term from gaming, if you're like me. MAGA, on the other hand, has wholeheartedly embraced outsiders with heterodox and controversial views, people who aren't afraid to share these opinions loudly and at great length all over social media. I don't always agree with them. They don't always agree with each other. There's tremendous variety and differences between someone like Joe Rogan, a superstar in this environment, former supporter of Bernie Sanders, by the way, and a Gen Z MAGA influencer on TikTok. Now look, there will always be a place for traditional media in the White House press briefing room, but by throwing open the doors to the kind of people who are thriving in this new media ecosystem, who are watched, read, and listened to by millions and millions and millions of Americans, far more Americans, frankly, than are still paying attention to legacy media, the Trump administration has demonstrated that it is getting with the times. As ex-CEO Linda Yaccarino put it, by allowing bloggers, social media influencers, and podcasters into the Brady briefing room, Caroline Leavitt is confirming what we already know. The world has changed. You are the media now. So this was a big announcement, something independent-minded people who are content creators or journalists on different platforms are really excited about. And I think it is a good thing and something people of a variety of ideological stripes can celebrate, having more access to this very legacy kind of media space for people who think a little differently.
Well, I agree with that, and I agree with Sagar's comments about the legacy media. The problem with the legacy media is that it has surrendered so much of its moral authority. It is so profit-driven, and it is so aligned with the idea that there's a particular kind of establishment viewpoint that they see themselves as the entitled protectors of. Opening that up is good. The problem I have is when Caroline Leavitt says, send me your form, and I will decide who gets to come in.
I mean, somebody's got to decide. There's a finite amount of space in the room.
Yes, but we see with what's happening with Phil McGraw and so forth. This White House is very focused on its own propaganda. It's very focused on its own messaging. So we'll see if we find out that all this alternative media is. I mean, look, he's president, so he has a right to his agenda and his bias to some extent. But if we find out that all that he's letting in, like 90% or 80%, even 70%, is these right-wing spaces as opposed to really allowing in other viewpoints, then that's going to be a problem, and there'll be pushback for that.
Our senators are a joke, and nothing made that clearer than how they handled the confirmation hearing of DNI director nominee Tulsi Gabbard, that's Director of National Intelligence. Now, it seems like there really is bipartisan hatred toward Tulsi Gabbard, but what really stood out to me is the fact that they all kept asking about her views on Edward Snowden. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Edward Snowden, he was the whistleblower who at the time alerted Glenn Greenwald about the NSA's indiscriminate spying of all Americans, okay? That was a huge scandal. And he is not a traitor to America. If anything, he is a patriot who felt the need to risk everything in his life to let the American people know that the federal government was indiscriminately spying on all of us. So truly, there's really no way that we can show you all the Snowden bashing coming from senators, but I do want to give you a little taste.
Until you are nominated by the president to be the DNI, you consistently praise the actions of Edward Snowden. Some who, I believe, jeopardized the security of our nation, and then, in an effort to flaunt that, fled to Russia. You even called Edward Snowden, and I quote here, a brave whistleblower. But Edward Snowden isn't a whistleblower. And in this case, I'm a lot closer to the chairman's words, where he said, Snowden is, quote, an egotistical, serial liar and traitor who, quote, deserves to rot in jail for the rest of his life.
Edward Snowden got mad at his employer that he didn't get the promotion that he wanted and started harvesting information and then found some things that he didn't like on it.
Why is he being treated like a folk hero by you instead of the traitor that he was?
We're going to get to Tulsi Gabbard's answer in just a minute, which, to be quite frank with you, I wasn't happy with. But it is infuriating to see the bipartisanship pushing this narrative that Edward Snowden is like some demon that should be, I mean, like they act as though he's like public enemy number one. We were all being spied on. Okay, the federal government was collecting data on every single one of us, regardless of what we've done, what we didn't do. It didn't matter. Indiscriminate spying by the federal government is an overreach of the federal government. And Edward Snowden basically threw his entire life away to let the American people know about that. He should be pardoned, period. But I don't know, it's unlikely to happen. What do you think, Jake?
Well, okay, so first to the senators. If I was in Tulsi's situation and they asked me, is Edward Snowden a traitor? Easy answer. Hell no. You authorizing spying on Americans illegally, you're the traitor. You're the actual enemy. And the reason why you're so mad at Edward Snowden is because he let us know that you're the actual enemy. Because he told us what you wouldn't tell us, that you were spying in on us. That's unconstitutional, it's illegal. And then you guys afterwards said, oh yeah, we want to do it anyway. And Edward Snowden's such a bad traitor for trying to protect your constitutional rights. No, he's not. Absolute American hero. It's the senators that are the goddamn problem. And look at the Uniparty. All of a sudden they're unified. No, spy on the plebeian masses. How dare you support a whistleblower telling you to protect your constitutional rights? Okay, now I turn to MAGA. I proposed pardoning Edward Snowden. Almost all of MAGA agreed. They loved that Tulsi Gabbard wanted to support Edward Snowden and support his pardon, etc. That was part of the reason that she rose up with the right wing. And what happened to your Republican senators? I know you hate a lot of them. Well, this is the time to show it, okay? Because these guys, and by the way, if you're a Democrat, also the same thing for you. Those Democratic senators are saying, let's go spying. Yay, spy on Americans. As a left-winger, you should despise that. The people who initially said Edward Snowden was a hero were on the left wing, okay? So, and by the way, this is not something that the left wing is hypocritical about. They have challenged Democrats and said that they were wrong, okay? Right wing, I know a lot of you believe this, well then show it, because we're not in charge. The right wing, unfortunately or unfortunately, I think unfortunately, but they think fortunately, you are in charge. So if you're in charge, are you gonna stand up and go, what the hell? No, we said Edward Snowden was a hero. We meant that he's a hero. Stop kissing the ass of the Uniparty and pardon the guy. Are you gonna put, by the way, not just about Tulsi, but are you gonna put pressure on Trump? Or is that guy gonna go another 4 years where everyone calls him a traitor, including Trump?
So I want to go to Tulsi Gabbard and how she answered one of the 1,000 times that she was asked this same question about Edward Snowden.
Ms. Gabbard, a simple yes or no question. Do you still think Edward Snowden is brave?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Edward Snowden broke the law. I do not agree with or support with all of the information and intelligence that he released, nor the way in which he did it. The fact is, he also, even as he broke the law, released information that exposed egregious, illegal, and unconstitutional programs that are happening within our government that led to serious reforms that Congress undertook.
Was Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
He broke the law. Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden-like leak.
Yes or no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
As someone who has worn our uniform in combat, I understand how critical our national security is.
Apparently you don't.
Yeah, the traitors to the United States of America are sitting in Congress, okay, fattening their bank accounts through insider trading that ordinary Americans would go to prison for a very long time, okay? The traitors to America and Americans are the corrupt politicians who provide cover for a corrupt government that indiscriminately spies on Americans, even when they've done absolutely nothing wrong. Okay, it's disgusting to see the bipartisan agreement on this issue And the fact that they think they're so high and mighty, as if they're not traitors to the American people, when they're elected to serve the best interests of the American people, but they consistently do the opposite.
And that's the game!
You've disconnected from the hive mind. Explain.